Habbo Retros, the dark side to Habbo Hotel. Illegal emulators of the official game that, much like official Habbo, had their own unique rise and fall. Throughout the lifetime of Retros, controversies would stir, developers of said Retros would get increasingly rich, and legal issues would rage between Sulake, the official developers of the game, and the Retro developers, culminating in some truly catastrophic court cases, where Habbo allowed teenagers to chat and hang out while exploring, trading and forming friendships, all while possibly getting groomed or scammed. Retros offered a similar, but even more lawless, Wild West of the internet style experience that hooked players. To quote myself in my first Habbo video, these experiences were a fond memory for some, but for others the tale is a little different. So today, let's explore the 20 or so year lifespan of Habbo Retros and take a closer look at the community, lawlessness, appeal, and what exactly led to their rise and unexpected fall. By now, you're probably already thinking this sounds pretty sketchy, but you know what else is pretty sketchy? Hackers, identity theft, and not being able to watch the show you want on your country's Netflix. Fucking England. Luckily, NordVPN is here to level up your online safety and give you access to a whole new range of shows and films. With just one click, NordVPN has you covered with the most advanced protection available. With Threat Protection Pro, NordVPN doesn't just mask your IP, it shields you from malware, phishing attempts, and even blocks ads, so your browsing is smoother and safer. And unlike most VPNs, this feature keeps you secure even when your VPN isn't connected. But that's not all. Do you know what information about you is out there online? Well, me neither. That's why NordVPN's dark web monitor scans the darkest corners of the internet to alert you if your information has been compromised, so you can take actions before the hackers do. With NordVPN, you get fast, secure, encrypted browsing on up to 10 devices with just one account. And if you're not satisfied, Nord offers a 30-day money-back guarantee. It's totally risk-free. Plus, you get to roleplay any nationality you want, while reaping access to the world's array of entertainment. I'm going to watch Pixar's 2007 classic Ratatouille right after this, so changing my nationality to French not only allows me to have access to the film, but also helps me set that immersive French tone. Pure euphoria. Don't wait, protect your digital life now. For a limited time, you'll get 4 extra months free on a 2-year plan by using my link nordvpn.com/slippin. Just click the link in the description and get started with NordVPN. But back to the video. Before we go any further, I want to quickly note that this video builds off a lot of what I discuss in my first Habbo video, so if you haven't seen it, go check it out and then head back here. But with that being said, to expand a bit more on what I mentioned in the intro, Habbo Retros are the seedy, illegal underground alternatives to Habbo Hotel, offering all the fun of the official Habbo with none of the censorship, misguided changes, or removal of features that pervaded Habbo's lifetime. Some servers even provided additional benefits, such as free items and custom features. As Sulake went about making increasingly worrying changes to the game, Retros were heralded in primarily by a nostalgic urge to revisit earlier versions of the game. The charming bugs, glitches, and general lovable jank of the earlier versions of Habbo attracted veterans unhappy with what official Habbo had become, and provided to some what would become an increasingly preferable version of the game, a safe haven to the sinking ship that was official Habbo. To go further and dive deeper into the rise and fall of Retros, we need to go back to the start and learn a bit more about specifically why and how Retros came to be in the first place. Retros first began to emerge on sites like Find Retro and Rage Zone, the MMORPG development forum, after source code was leaked from Solarke around what many speculate to have been the 2006 period. Now, there's a lot of debate over what the very first Retro was, with some claiming it's Hab Plus, whereas others claim it's Habbo 2. There are even claims that the first server originated even earlier in 2005, known simply as MDK V1. What's important is that they generally all seem to spring up at once, like homunculi arising from Solarke's primordial soup source code. While the early 2000s isn't exactly prehistoric history, asking what the very first Retro was is like asking what the exact first creature to heave itself from the water onto land was, which is a very convoluted way of saying that the history is so rich and plentiful surrounding Retros that it's kind of hard to actually tell. Crucially, it's important to note that no two Retros were the same, but they all offered a pure Habbo experience that players yearned for, plus some new features not available in the original game, like custom animations or items. To understand this more, let's take a look at the three main types of Retros. There were, of course, other more experimental servers out of the following three types, but generally most would fit within the following brackets. First, we have old school servers, which aimed to imitate some of the earlier versions of the game released during the first few years of Habbo's lifetime. They attracted players by allowing them to goof around with the same wacky room layouts and glitches from the original versions of the game. Second up, we have Flash Hotels, which, on the other hand, are more contemporary versions of the game, featuring custom content such as Fernie, animations, and effects. And last but not least, there were also the very popular roleplay servers, where players became crime bosses or doctors, or just pretended to be parents and played Happy Family. With so many options for gameplay experiences, the Habbo Retro community formed their own little ecosystem, with servers rising and falling in popularity as others succeeded them, with some of the most popular servers surpassing more than 1,000 users online at one time. Communities grew and friendships were formed, creating an online space that some deemed to be much more approachable than the official Habbo community. And through this, some servers became opportunities for collaborations. Servers such as the Holograph emulator were completely open source projects, allowing anyone to edit it, a testament to both the creativity and trust of the community. This collaborative, creative, and oftentimes rebellious nature of the players and created some experimental economic systems, with some Retros even introducing unique currencies, betting systems, or features like daily rewards for logging in. The best part is, all of this was free. Usually. There are some very notable exceptions to that rule, but there's a lot to discuss there. So we'll dive deeper into it in the next section, but for the sake of pacing, generally I'll say for now that most servers allowed users to earn currency in-game and spend it on Fernie, or even bet it away in the hopes of making more if they felt so inclined. Overall, this made Retros a lot more accessible and approachable than the often heavily monetized and moderated Habbo. There were plenty of other servers offering all kind of different experiences, some of which came to be recognized as well-established and beloved servers, fostering thousands of players. To illustrate this more effectively, let's hold the lens over some popular servers and take a look at what they offered. First of all, we have Haboon, known for its unique events, contests, role-playing, and generous offering of credits and diamonds given free to players upon joining.
You get 75 credits every 15 minutes. Please, sorry, I'm not very good at this sort of stuff. Obviously I was kicked out of the room because they don't want to be on YouTube, but here you can find events, you can find your rooms, which I'll explain later in another video. You can see the official rooms here. So for example, there's 2 mazes and you get badges for that, little prizes. Also, you can search.
Established in the early 2010s, it quickly rose to foster a thriving community, now being remembered as the largest Habbo retro of all time. At its peak, it had tens of thousands of active users, rivaling that of even the actual Habbo servers themselves. Some Habbo players were even getting permanently banned for discussing or promoting Haboon. But how could all of this be possible in the first place? Surely with so much attention and competition, Solaque at the very least would have shut down the biggest servers. Well, it turns out there was some fishy business going on, which again we'll get more into later. Most importantly, Haboon represented Habbo in its rawest, most lawless form. Back were all the features Habbo players knew and loved, such as gambling rooms and even sex dungeons, if that's your thing. Some of the more modern retros like Hablush or HXBBO use HTML5, which, if you don't know, is the most recent standard of code which web pages are built on today. This allows retros to run in browser without having to use their own client. To me, this showcases that due to the small teams behind retros, along with their open source nature, they're actually able to adapt a lot faster to the modern world than official Habbo is, potentially giving it another reason why so many seem to prefer retros, a fact no better illustrated than in 2012, when the retro community boomed, with thousands migrating from the burning wreck of official Habbo and its great mute disaster and escaping to the warm safety of retros. With so much newfound attention on retros in 2012, the response from Solaque was easy to foresee, but the extent of their legal methods was surprising to say the very least. By now, it's clear to see just how beloved retros were by some people, but despite the love of some of the community, not everyone was a big fan of retros. Least of all, Solaque themselves, who saw retros as a direct competitor to Habbo. And for good reason. While most servers were essentially just free-to-play sandboxes, some of the more established emulators began to monetize their servers. If and how a server chose to monetize was entirely up to them, but those that did so went about it in a range of ways. Some would run ads or simply ask for donations in order to cover their server running costs, which typically hovered around $25 a month. But others would directly copy Solaque by selling VIP packages and rare retros for just a few pounds a month. Ironically, this was more or less the same price as the official Habbo club price, which suggests that those who would pay for VIP on retros were doing so more out of protest of modern Habbo and its censorship rather than for a lack of money. There are even guides, such as the one seen here, on how retro owners should go about setting up and selling VIP. It's pretty vague how much the average server would actually rake in, but considering the high player counts of some servers, it's easy to imagine it wouldn't exactly be something to scoff at. There are even claims that some server owners were raking in thousands each month. How veritable this is exactly is anyone's guess. But most interestingly of all was a case surrounding a man called Aaron Marshall, or Sojabo as he's better known online. His story begins in 2005, when Aaron, along with a team of like-minded coders, felt inspired by the very first retros, which emulated the very first version of the game, and so they began work on a server that emulated version 9 of Habbo, the most recent release at the time. In 2006, following the success of their first retro, Aaron then set out to create his own retro, named originally Otaku Hotel, Eventually, Aaron earned so much money from this that he was able to move from Scotland to Bulgaria, where he bought himself a house and a car with his income. Now, if Scotland to Bulgaria seems a bit bizarre, don't worry. As it turns out, this choice was just as sketchy as it sounds. But that will all begin to make sense soon. At the time, everything seemed great for Aaron. However, Aaron was completely unaware of just how much danger he was in. To provide some much needed context in order to understand the tragedy of Aaron Marshall, first we need to lay some groundwork by raising the magnifying glass and taking a broader look at the legal action Solarke took against Retros. Solarke's first port of call involved the active discouragement of users from ever trying Retros in the first place. They did so by warning of the security risk of Retros. Retros often didn't have sufficient security measures in place, and so user data was often easily attained. Furthermore, players would often use the same logins for Retros as they used on official Habbo servers. And unfortunately, in many cases, Retro owners would use these logins to gain access to official accounts and steal their Fernie. Fears of spyware, viruses, and lost Fernie were somewhat effective in reducing player numbers. However, there were some that, for better or for worse, saw this as blatant fearmongering and decided to try out Retros anyway. Coupled with this, there was the fact that some claimed Solarke never even bothered taking legitimate legal action against Retros, overall making Solarke look weak and powerless to the influence of the emulator community. But if we dig a bit deeper, we can see that when Solarke did decide to take action, they truly brought the hammer down. And my use of the word when is very important there, as Solarke didn't seem to pursue justice equally. Some big servers seemed to virtually be ignored, whereas some small servers that had just started out were instantly smited down by the Solarke gods. So why all of this randomness? Well, the main point is that it wasn't random at all, but instead could be described as tactical. You see, Solarke didn't have the time and money to pursue every single server, so they had to be smart with who they went after. And so, more often than not, smaller servers were easier targets. As you might expect, smaller servers were typically set up as pet projects by Habbo fans. All Solarke had to do was send out a cheeky little DMCA, and most would pull the plug on their Retros. So why couldn't they do this for larger Retros? You know, the ones actually eating into their profit margin. Well, here's where things get truly insane. As it turns out, I lied. Solarke did go after big servers, but had varying levels of success. Make no mistake, Solarke did initially try to tackle the larger servers with the standard send out a DMCA and threaten court action should the Retro not be taken down move. But quickly they learned this wasn't going to be enough, as the tenacity and persistence of the Retro community was unlike anything they could have expected. I suppose it wouldn't be fully truthful to say that the DMCA letters weren't effective. They were, but just not long term. Most Retros that had received a cease and desist letter would throw in the towel and shut their service down, before reappearing weeks or even months later under different names and domains. So Solarke escalated to outright domain seizures by working with hosting providers and authorities. But even still, this was not enough to stop Retros altogether. The sheer number of Retros popping up left, right and center left Solarke and their cybercrime units with insufficient resources to deal with them all. There's simply also the fact that most Retro owners saw through the hollow threats of Solaque, and this was helped by a wider legal knowledge base granted by fostering a large community. Now, this isn't to imply that Retro owners were Jimmy McGills, but they certainly had enough legal knowledge to ignore hollow threats and find loopholes for the more serious ones. Loopholes such as hosting in countries with weak copyright laws. Countries like China, Brazil, fucking Cambodia, and Bulgaria. Most who monetize their servers would collect payments through anonymous means like cryptocurrencies in order to avoid having payments traced back to them. User Donze from the Rage Zone forum says that if you lived in the Netherlands, you can put up to 100,000 euros in the bank without being asked where you even got the money. Is this true? Maybe. If so, that's utterly insane, but Netherlands folk, let me know in the comments. Soon though, Solaque began to realise their efforts to squash individual servers were futile. It wasn't the Retros themselves that were the problem, but rather the owners. Solaque knew the only ways to stop new Retros from popping up was to make a lesson of some unfortunate owners, which takes us back to one of the most brutal examples. Aaron Marshall. By now, you've probably already connected the dots and are realizing that Aaron's choice to move to Bulgaria wasn't just a random coincidence. It seems Aaron moved specifically to avoid being prosecuted for copyright violations, which is frankly fucking deranged when you think about it. For a while, Aaron probably assumed he was in the clear. That was until 2013, when Aaron found himself with a court summons from Solaque themselves, who were seeking more than $500,000 in damages. Aaron at this point was probably thinking, God, why? If only there's something I could have done to prevent this, as he slumped into his chair made from hundreds of DMCA notices. That's right, Aaron from 2006 to 2013 had received literally hundreds of DMCA notices, all of which he obviously ignored. Even Aaron's own friends found it hard to justify his actions on the Rage Zone forums, stating that he could have chosen to stop developing his server at any point. It's a little hard to find information on what exactly happened to Aaron with the court proceedings. Most importantly, we know that, surprise surprise, Solaque did end up winning, but just how much they actually took from Aaron in both liquid cash and assets is largely unknown. During the debacle, his house and even his car, along with other assets, were seized and were held onto for insurance while the court proceedings went ahead. Generally, after the incident, Aaron, or Sojobo, seemed to have a fairly upbeat outlook on it, understanding that the gig was up and he was in the wrong. Either way, afterwards, Sojobo decided to turn his online presence away from Habbo, shutting down his Retro and dedicating his site to gaming in general rather than Habbo emulation. So, Aaron was firmly discouraged from ever partaking in Retro development again. But did stories like this have a discouraging effect on the rest of the development community? Well, the short answer is no. No, not really. There's not really too much else to say. Retros, while much smaller now, still continue to this day. It honestly probably would have led to a much more dramatic script if this had been the turning point in the downfall of Retros, but honestly I find it much more of a testament to just how persistent and determined the community was. To me, it shows just how much love and passion the Retro community has for a game they clearly hold very dear. But as united as the community was, there were stark divides in attitudes towards how Aaron was treated, as well as increasing divides in a more general sense that began to take shape over time. As a quick interjection and last word on this segment though, I do want to add that Solace, seemingly being very merciful, did end up giving Aaron's house back. By the looks of his Twitter, Aaron seems to be getting on very well these days, and has put the controversy firmly behind him. The retro community unanimously deciding that, while a good friend to many, Aaron did have it coming is interesting. There's varying degrees of sympathy towards him, but the general attitude from those in his circle as well as onlookers is that Aaron couldn't have expected to get as rich as he did from his retro without a few problems along the way. However, as the years went on, the threat was no longer much of an external threat from Solace, more so an internal one, as the decline in revenue from Habbo meant it was no longer effective or feasible to sue retro owners. Luckily for Solace though, instead, as cracks and internal controversies began to form inside official Habbo, so too did they begin to show inside the retro community. While initially it seems like retros were built from a shared sense of rebellion against Solace's increasingly bad choices, around the 2013 point, not long after Aaron's legal issues, it seems the community was truly beginning to fracture and turn on itself. These fractures came largely as the result of increasing competition between retros. The community had begun to scramble for attention and money from an ever-declining player base. Seemingly one of the largest controversies circulated Habbo Hotel. Yes, that's Habbo with an A, not an O, just in case you were wondering, which had been accused of DDoSing, examining traffic logs and utilising auto-clickers to register fake votes, and generally doing whatever they could to maintain their position as one of the most played retros. Some claimed there was no evidence proving they did anything, and others claimed Habbo was guilty, and some straight up justifying Habbo's practices, claiming that all retros engage in similar practices. Now, I could dive deeper into this specific controversy surrounding Habbo, but for the sake of pacing and relevancy, instead I'll leave the link to the thread in the description so you can check it out for yourself if you fancy. The most important aspects to note are that A, users frequently refer to each other on a first name basis, showing just how intimate the community is, and B, that all of this went down only a few months ago, in October of 2024, showing that while seemingly on the decline, the retro community is very much still active. And finally, C, a very interesting unlisted video by user Sledmore, showing him using tools such as Cloudflare and Google Analytics to show discrepancies between the players supposedly on the server and those actually online. On findretros.com, the server is very clearly listed as having 167 users currently active. However, on the actual server, there is very clearly only just 20. Very fishy, and more or less solidifies accusations that most retros were, and probably still are, botting player counts. But what's most important to remember is that despite all of Habbo's trying times, plus a whole range of new issues wrought upon the retro community, there is, amongst the bickering and controversies, a small spark of what once was. Well, there we have it. The rise and slow, gradual fall of Habbo retros. These days they continue to fade into obscurity even faster than official Habbo. It's somewhat poetic that retros have, for the most part, shared the exact same lifespan as Habbo, serving along the way as somewhat of a criminal underbelly to an already morally dubious official game. As mentioned, it's impressive that retros are even still still alive and kicking in 2025, even if they are just a shell of their former selves. So, in retrospect, the story of Habbo Retros really is no surprise. The innovative nature of retros should have come to be expected from a community as vast, creative, and increasingly dissatisfied as the Habbo community. It's hardly shocking to find that retros are also beginning to truly fizzle out, alongside the official Habbo player base. Now, this is pure speculation, but given what we now know, I believe Habbo Origins was intentionally released by Solaque to sponge up the remaining retro player base, as the increasing controversies and concerns over player counts continue to split the community. It's not really a point I want to linger on, as I have no real evidence to confirm this. It's more just something fun for you guys to discuss in the comments. The main question is whether or not Habbos were a form of rebellion against what many perceive to be the exponential greed and worsening decision-making of Solaque, or if they were just another form of piracy, given justification by convenient excuses. Again, let me know in the comments. Overall though, it seems that the main loss was not of the servers themselves, but the friendship, the community, and the freedom that beamed from the height of retro popularity. Though that may now be gone, one of the main purposes of this video is to keep the flame of those memories alive, for those who once found an escape either inside Habbo itself or a retro counterpart. But with that being said, thank you as always for watching. Until next time.